Zealand and Niue, Population and Poverty. According to John Connell's Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies, in the past 40 years, the Polynesian island of Niue has experienced a population decline greater than that of any other independent state in the world. More than 3/4 of all Niue-born live overseas, mainly in New Zealand. The balance continues to shift overseas, mainly because of the presence of kin, education, and employment opportunities there. Families with kin spread across countries have developed new transnational forms of family life. Given the ubiquity of migration, island families have reconciled changes in local culture and the social costs of disrupted extended households, in part because of the unavoidable logic of migration and its economic benefits. A culture of migration is created whereby migration may be assumed to be positive, acceptable, and even inevitable. Practices of mobility are deeply entrenched in islanders' lives. Even those who have stayed in Niue, where dualities of hope and despair, and fluidity and fixity govern conceptualizations of population change. Migration constitutes no rupture with island life, but is an extension of it. By contrast, Niue, as a state, perceives itself to be facing depopulation and has long sought to encourage return migration and also immigration to prevent this. Niue, the smallest independent state in the world, became self-governing in free association with New Zealand in 1974. Its citizens are New Zealand citizens. Niue is a large, uplifted coral atoll, sometimes referred to as the Rock of Polynesia. The Niue population, around 4,000 for most of the first half of the 20th century, peaked at over 5,000 in the mid-1960s, but has subsequently steadily fallen to just around 1,200 people. According to Theguardian news, Cyclone Heta in January 2003 inflicted around $51 million worth of damage to Niue. Many families are known to have fled the island since then. Also, Statistics New Zealand lists 20,100 Niuean people living in New Zealand, with 70% of them born in New Zealand. Since 1974, Niue has sought to develop both a private sector and an export economy. However, despite many attempts, none has ever generated significant or consistent export income, nor generated adequate productive employment. Hence the extent of emigration from Niue. The challenges of developing an export economy without subsidies from such a small and remote island, where there are no possibilities of economies of scale, and where poor soils and natural hazards mitigate against agriculture development, are such that conventional development strategies through export production have been argued to be no more than a prescriptive unreality, though these must necessarily exist to demonstrate the desire to move away from aid dependence. Like other small tropical islands, Niue has also sought to develop a tourist industry, but hampered by poor connections, this too is largely underpinned by the public sector and international aid, and similarly constitutes a degree of prescriptive unreality. I suggest further research and investment in the tourist industry in order to preserve their culture and contribute to the island's economy as well as their population. New Zealand, in comparison, doesn't seem to have a lack of human population and space to accommodate with a population of about 4.4 million people. Estimates from the 2013 census classify New Zealand with 14.9% as Maori, 11.8% as Asian, 7.4% as Pacific Islander origin, and 1.2% as individuals of Middle Eastern, Latin American, and African descent. Approximately 3/4 of the rest of the population of New Zealand were of European ethnicity. Another issue worth considering is poverty in the midst of New Zealand's prosperity. According to Christian Council of Christian Services, there is no official poverty line in New Zealand, and as there is in other countries, and there's no formal agreement about exactly how to measure poverty. But there are around 622,000 people in poverty in this country, or 1 in 7 households, including around 230,000 children. Being in poverty means experiencing hunger and food insecurity, poor health outcomes, reduced life expectancy, debt, and unaffordable or bad housing. Because people in poverty must survive on very low incomes, they are adept at budgeting and making ends meet. Employment alone does not solve poverty, and unemployment remains high. Obtaining work in itself does not guarantee that poverty will be alleviated. Many jobs are precarious or insecure and don't pay as well as a full-time permanent job. There are good reasons why not all beneficiaries should get a job right now. There are those with health problems, disabilities, and childcare responsibilities, all present major barriers to work. Economic growth alone will not necessarily address poverty and inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor is very large and shows little sign of declining. There are more people in poverty now than there were in the 1980s, currently in New Zealand. I believe a solution to balancing the distribution of financials will have to come through the aid of the government. Maybe create an organization that guides support on education and awareness on how to become financially stable or successful. In comparison, according to the United Nations Development Program, Niue's progress to achieving the Millennium Development Goals has been steady. The commitment shown by the government of Niue has enabled the achievement of 6 of the 8 total goals. A report in 2006 by the Millennium Development Program says that they have achieved 1. To eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, 2. Universal primary education, 3. Promote gender equality and empowerment to women, 4. Reduce child mortality, 5. Improved maternal health, and 6. Combated HIV, AIDS, and non-communicable diseases. The overall result for achieving sustainable development shows that every Niuean citizen has access to basic essential services such as running water, power, roads, education, medical care, housing, telephones, televisions, and internet services. Despite the current efforts to sustain development growth and the backdrop of the Millennium Development Goals achievement, Niue faces massive human resource depletion as a direct result of depopulation mentioned earlier. This has put a huge strain in the government's development efforts. Overall, Niue seems to be flourishing and achieving economic goals, despite the strain from depopulation. There is always room for improvement, but population decline seems to be hindering their progress.